Good morning, Forrest Fenn fans. This is the Fengineer with some more exciting insights to Forrest Fenn's The Thrill of the Chase and the solve at Glen's Creek. Who do you think you're fooling? Part 2. I've got some exciting new material today that really takes a lot of my prior threads and pulls them together in a much tighter package. Let me give you first my perspective on the hints and clues. Forrest Fenn said, read every word and find a couple clues. And I think that was just humorous understatement. I think there's hundreds of clues in the thrill of the chase, and they're in the form of numbers, stories, coordinates, graphics, the poem poster, everything. There's simpler ones that point to the general area and more difficult ones to find or interpret or sort out that give more specific insights. I don't think there's a backdoor solve to the treasure chest side, although I'm waffling on that a little bit. I think there's a partial backdoor solve. I'll present that probably next week. But in general, I think all these hundreds of clues form a rich tapestry that weave together. They're not just random clues. They weave together and form a support. Certainly, I believe you need to solve the poem to find the chest, but I think without this rich, tapestry of interconnecting clues that's allow you to interpret the poem correctly, the poem's just too vague to solve it by just looking at the poem. That's why the treasure wasn't found for 10 years. And so that's my perspective, and that's why I'm going into such detail, because I believe there's hundreds of clues, and if you don't understand these hundreds of clues, you're just playing canasta, because you're just then trying to fit the poem to wherever you've decided to apply it. And certainly I've been there. That's confirmation bias. And certainly also you have to apply all the clues. You can't just apply some of the clues, because if you're cherry picking clues to fit the solve, we all know what dangerous practice that is. So you've got to really solve all of them, which means there's a ton of detail. And let's get into it. I presented this previously. Teachers with Ropes, Flywater, Golden Moor, as many references to alphas and kings, king of beasts, lions. You can refer to my prior videos. These lead to insights about the Wizard of Oz, and connections, interwoven connections to colleges and the important literature section, which these colleges that the key people went to lead you to go Lions, go Tigers, go Bears for the mascots for these different universities. And interestingly, Hemingway is missing because he didn't go to college, and I can explain that, but not right now. I'll get to it later in this video. And in Bessie and Me, more on the Wizard of Oz. I mean, we know that was Forrest Fenn's nickname. The postmark for Bessie and Me, the date on it was the date of the Wizard of Oz release, and My Backyard is the conclusion to the movie. But the bottom line is that the land of the North Witch was Galican, and Galican is an awful lot like Gallatin. And what do we do with that? Well, first we note that the Custer-Gallatin Forest wraps around the northwest corner of Yellowstone, and the Gallatin Mountain Range also runs through that northwest corner down to Mount Hayes, about the end of the Firehole River. There's many mountain peaks in there, and that coincides with also another important locational reference, which is the poem poster, which has these degrees of magnetic declination, and the D's, degrees of magnetic declination, are inferred, hinted at from Einstein's quote, and the fact that Forrest prayed for D's, but no one would listen. And that, with those clues, you're focused in on the northwest corner of Yellowstone. And so more clues that weave into this tapestry. There's an antler peak in the Gallatin Mountains, and that formerly was known as Bell Mountain. And adjacent to Bell Mountain on the Montana border is Campanula Creek. Campanula is Spanish for bellflower. And so we start seeing these connections, many interwoven connections of bells. So we got the bellflower, For Whom the Bell Tolls by Hemingway, Forrest Fenn's Braun Bells, Blue Jeans and Hush Puppies. In the 70s, blue jeans were known as bell bottoms. And in the story about Miss Ford, where Forrest gets in trouble and gets lectured by his dad for calling Miss Ford an old bat, that's a reference to bats in the belfry, and that's uh, another bell. And the reason we're interested in bells is because Apollo tears are a mythical flower that sprang from the blood of his dying friend, Prince Hyacinthus, and Apollo shed these tears and marked the flower petals with lighter lines. And this reference to Apollo, then we get Apollinaris Spring, which is a famous spring south of Mammoth Hot Springs, was in existence back to the days of the stagecoaches where they stopped for water. It was a big deal then, less of a big deal now, but it's a very famous place in the park. So I've noted that the Bell Mountain and Apollo for the Apollinaris Spring, and hints to rich is old, and moving down from there is the Obsidian Cliffs, which is these riches were the Clovis points that the Indians made from the obsidian. And this was really, I mean, these were truly riches. I mean, and for cultures that didn't, and people that didn't have steel or metal of any kind. I mean, these obsidian Clovis points for arrowheads and cutting tools were literally more valuable than gold. And farther south, we have Purple Mountain, and again, this is just showing the interwoven tapestry of these clues, but the references to the different colors of teas, of red, green, and black. So red and green make brown, but also purple. If you switch it up, yellow and purple make brown. So Purple Mountain in Yellowstone Park makes brown. And so I'm not saying that's a Homer Brown, but it gets you to think, and then it gets you to think about the black tea, and it gets you to think about Obsidian Cliff, which is relatively nearby. And you've got this Paul Simon reference, with Ora May and Forrest Fenn's father. So the One Trick Pony is a movie starring Paul Simon, and one of his famous songs is "Love Me Like a Rock," and the chorus in there is "Who do you think you're fooling?" So the Hoodoos. That's a reference to that. So these are just general area clues showing that we're on the right track. And so here's the first solve of the poem, Where Warm Waters Halt. So you're looking up at the Gallatin Range, and the Wicked Witch of the West is the reference there, www. And Obsidian Cliff, which you've got these references to Purple Mountain and Tea with Olga, and Forrest Fenn in the picture where he's signing something, or in the very first pages of the book at the turquoise mine. He's wearing a black hat, and later he says he wanted to be Hopalong Cassidy. And Hopalong Cassidy was a good guy, but he wore a black hat. And I think those point to the Obsidian Cliffs. And they're right under the Obsidian Cliffs. There are actual sources of hot water, springs of hot water. So it's meets forest criteria that you can actually go down and touch the water. And I'm not going to explain this in a lot of detail, but there's another huge story I could go into about this in the late 1800s. A guy named William Wallace Wiley, who developed the first tent camps that were like mobile tent camps. And he called it the Wiley Way camps. And the first one was at Apollinaris Springs. And the H then comes from the Hayes Act, which essentially, after he struggled for 30 years in business, the Hayes Act undercut him, and there was very political maneuverings, and he ended up having to sell out for pennies on the dollar due to not being able to get a contract to operate in the park. So it's a ton of detail I could go into there, but I'll spare you. In gold and more, we've got the poem, of course, and we know I've shown in my previous videos that you can count the syllables and count the words and get this number 22, and also what a number that looks like a latitude: 44 degrees, 53 minutes, and 33 seconds. And I've shown in prior videos in a lot more detail about how these various hints and many hints in the thrill of the chase combine into lines that converge to tell a story. And I'm not going to go over that now. I've taken that graphic and added this poem latitude line, and we'll definitely need a. Let's flip the world around for a second and look at the opposite of that triangle area that was formed in the United States, and we find the exact same triangular area formed by the East Coast line and the red line and the blue line, which was the Temple to Yellowstone to Vietnam. And if you take that poem latitude line and flip it down to the south instead of the north, then you get this triangle on the in the Indian Ocean. And you say, what's there? Absolutely nothing. So why did I bring it up? Well, on the seafloor, there's this thing called the Southeast Indian Ridge. And the Southeast Indian Ridge, I believe, is a hint to Sheep Eater Cliff. And that's where I'm taking the canyon down past Sheep Eater Cliff. And we're going to put in below the Homer Brown. And Homer Brown, in my opinion, is the Captain Oscar Brown, who was the acting superintendent of the park at the end of the 1800s. And he's the one that suggested the Roosevelt Arch. And so the Homer Brown is Fort Yellowstone, and below the Homer Brown then is south. So we were at the where Warm Water Salt is at Obsidian Cliff, and we went down to Homer Brown, and we're going to be coming back south from there. I'm going to quickly summarize what I presented previously in this related to this chapter, first grade. Forrest Fenn's friend was Billy Joe Ray, who I believe is a reference to William Joseph Raymond, who was an actor that he played the mob boss, the Don, the Greek on the TV show Wired. And the guy who was going to come beat up for us was John Charles Whatever, who was the John Charles Worth, the actor that played the kid in the Christmas Carol. But for our purposes, the relevant point is he played the lead role in the 1951 movie in Tom Brown's School Days, which was a book written in 1857. It's about private boys' boarding school in England that goes through a lot of issues about bravery and cowardice, and there's secret fishing holes and father figures and philosophy of life discussions that really very much mirror many of the things that are in the thrill of the chase, and including like the phrase that Forrest used. He was, John Charles was going to beat him up to see how high he'd bounce, and that relates to a scene in the movie in Tom Brown's School Days about these bullies were tossing the kids on the blankets, and Tom Brown then decides to just be brave and take his turn, as opposed to some of the other kids were scared and the bullies had to pull them out from under their beds. And then also noting that one of Forrest's favorite books was the Osborne Russell's Journal of a Trapper. So what does all this have in common? Why are we talking about this? Yes, why are we talking about this? What's the connection between these things? Well, Tom Brown's home was in Vale of White Horse, Oxford, and this is the same Oxford, England, where the University of Oxford, with its 39 colleges, is located. And in Osborne Russell's Journal of a Trapper, the introductory quote is by Sir Thomas Browne. And so you see things are starting to connect up. And even in this graphic from Bessie and me on Forrest Fenn's head, I believe it says Vale, as a hint to the Vale of the White Horse. And so what does this mean? It all comes down to Oxford. That's the important thing, and I'll explain that. But some more reasons, this interwoven tapestry of clues. The boss in the yellow Cadillac in the Totem Cafe caper. That's a reference to the mobster Tony Montana in the movie Scarface, who drove a yellow Cadillac. And mobsters are bosses are called referred to as dons, and teachers, Oxford teachers, are also called dons, and they wear these fancy robes. So that chapter where he's Forrest is showing off the art to the kids. That's not teachers with ropes, but it's teachers with robes. And so more references to Oxford. Let's say you didn't want to go through that whole Tom Brown School Days thing, too complicated. What else? How else could we get to Oxford? Well, we know we've got these references to lions and Omar Khayyam and even daisies, which they all point to King Richard I, who was known as Richard the Lionheart, and he ruled from his throne was in Oxford, England. Blue jeans and hush puppies. How else could we get to Oxford if you say you don't want to you don't want to do any of that? Well, a hush puppy is a comfortable shoe, which is also known as an Oxford. And the Wolverine Worldwide company had a mascot that was a basset hound, and Forrest said sometimes it's wise for the fox to dress like the hound. Apparently, he meant the basset hound, and in No Place for Biddies, there's a hint that one of the biddies thought she was better than Forrest because she lived in a brick house. That's a reference to the Three Little Pigs, and these hush puppies were made of pigskin. So again, you see just this interconnection of all these clues. If you take a line and connect Oxford, England to Texas A&M, it goes very close to Oxford, Mississippi. Now, that's the home of the poet Faulkner, who was a contemporary of J.D. Salinger and F. Scott Fitzgerald. I mean, they partied and criticized each other. It was a club. Hemingway was involved in that club as well. In Oxford, there's this Hemingway Stadium, and it didn't actually refer to Ernest Hemingway, who is the author, but it referred to a local judge. But still, I mean, it's Hemingway Stadium. So I mean, it just shows you as you start pulling these threads, this is all connected. And again, as we saw with the other important literature section, some of the key clues were the mascots, the sports teams' mascots at these universities. The Texas A&M is Go Aggies. Well, Aggies, I mean, that refers to that whole chapter where Forrest was shooting marbles and making marbles. And in Oxford, Mississippi, the Hemingway Stadium and the University of Oxford or University of Mississippi is Go Rebels, which maybe all those times Forrest was saying Maverick was going to find the chest, he was really giving us a hint to the rebels to try to help us pull all this together. So to me, this is a very clear and persuasive uh, set of lines that converge to tell a story, and that story is about Oxford, and Oxford is the city of the dreaming spires. That's why this is important. So all these references to Oxford funnel down to this, the city of the dreaming spires. And what do we do with that? So the term the city of the dreaming spires was from a poem by Matthew Arnold, where he coined this term, city of the dreaming spires, and Oxford adopted it. And in Tom Brown's School Days, Tom Brown loved a older woman named Mrs. Arnold, and that's a literary reference by the author of the book Tom Brown's School Days to the poet uh, Arnold, showing he was aware of his poem and the references to City of a Dreaming Spire. And similarly, Forrest Fenn gave this description of Mrs. Ford, who's very similar to the way that Tom Brown loved Mrs. Arnold, and showing that Forrest was aware of this, and that he was aware of the connection and pointing us to this connection. And so, what do we do with that? So, we know that we can find that Arnold Hague was this uh, Yellowstone National Park's first geologist, and he did most of the pioneering geology work within the park. And the spires, these spires in Oxford were the church cathedrals, and there's a picture of that there. But what they inspire me to think of is geologic spires, and that as described by Arnold Hay. So it's City of Dreaming Spires. How do we find spires in Yellowstone? Well, we could Google the word spires or needles or pinnacles, and some little things come up. But surprisingly, it's kind of hit and miss. There's nothing that really like just leaps out at you. There's some things that a few people call spires by Tower Falls, but geologists don't refer to those as spires specifically. These eroded areas along the Yellowstone River are not really officially spires either. There's by Bunsen Peak. There's a kind of a spire looking thing, but it's not doesn't really have a name. What else do we have? Well, we've got petrified forests certainly, and another type of spires, geologic spires, is hoodoo, and both of those occur in Yellowstone Park. So let's figure out what we can figure out. For the petrified and fossil forests, there's many of those in the park, hundreds in fact, and most of them occur in several areas in the north central part of the park. These are all east of Tower Junction, and I'm really focused because of the 12 degrees of declination on west of Tower Junction. So I'm interpreting these as just general area clues. There's many references in The Thrill of the Chase to trees and rocks and leaning on rocks, and the whole issue of these petrified trees and forests, and how many of them lean, and why do they lean or why do they not lean, because most of them were found in the upright position, which is very unusual for a fossilized tree to be found upright, but they were buried in catastrophic mud flows from volcanic eruptions, and that left them standing up and entombed, and they were fossilized thereafter. And let's see, there is the references to the French soldiers is interesting because they were dead and buried, they were hidden from life by millions of sunsets, and after a violent ending, these French soldiers were hidden by time and nature. I mean, certainly it seems like Forrest has given a nod to these trees that were, fossilized after they became buried. All those are, relatively near Highway 212, east of Tower Junction. I guess if you're a Slough Creek fan, these might hold more interest. There's so many areas where these things occur, though they can't be really more than a general area clue, in my opinion, because there's just too many of them. How could you know to focus in on any particular one? And I think again, they're just pointing to Yellowstone in general, or northern Yellowstone, as opposed to say down by the Firehole River. If somebody wants, to take a crack at working this into a Slough Creek solve, I'd love to see it, but not me. The last category of geologic spires was hoodoos, and hoodoos are flat top stacks of rock. There's a specific area known as the hoodoos south of Mammoth Hot Springs. Geologists refer to these formations as damsels coiffes, or ladies with hairdos. And you note that the ladies do have flat top hairdos. Other references in The Thrill of the Chase stories include the old biddies long since dead, so implying some old formations, geologically old formations, and the biddies were slowing the line, again implying the time, but also Forrest didn't say it directly, but kind of implying he had bad luck for getting behind them, and hoodoos is a term that was the original source of the term was voodoo, and that's a synonym for hoodoo. And Certainly that is associated with bad luck. And even the title of the chapter, No Place for Biddies. Well, is that no place for the meek in the poem? Could it be that simple? Well, that kind of jumps you ahead of Where Warm Waters Halt and Home of Brown. So well, we'll see. Catch me next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. This has been the Fengineer. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a like and subscribe to my channel. More great content coming up.